At 34, Chidi Okafor controlled an empire worth more than most countries. 3 continents, 11 subsidiaries, and a name that made boardrooms go silent the moment it was spoken. And on a cracked sidewalk at the edge of the city's forgotten quarter, a blind girl named Neka sat behind a rusted tin bucket filled with flowers she had never seen. Neither of them knew it yet, but on a night when the city bled violence into its own streets, fate would push a dying billionaire into the only doorway where someone couldn't see his face, but could feel his heartbeat. The skyline of Lagos sparkled through floor-to-ceiling windows. 42 stories above the noise, the air smelled of leather and polished mahogany. The kind of silence that only extreme wealth could buy filled the penthouse office. Chidi sat behind his desk, a hand pressed against his temple. The desk was Italian marble. The chair was custom. The view was worth millions. And none of it mattered tonight. 3 files lay open in front of him, each one a warning. His chief of security, Emeka, stood near the door, arms folded, waiting. "Say it," Chidi said, without looking up. Emeka exhaled slowly. "Victor isn't just trying to take your shares anymore." Silence. Heavy. "He's building a case to have you removed entirely," Emeka continued. "And the people backing him are not small." Chidi's jaw tightened. His fingers pressed harder against the marble surface. "How long?" "Weeks, maybe less." Another silence. This one colder. Chidi leaned back. His gaze drifted toward the window. Somewhere down there, 42 stories below, the city moved without knowing that the man who funded half its hospitals was slowly being eaten alive by the people closest to him. "Do they know about the offshore accounts?" Chidi asked. Emeka hesitated. "Not yet. Then we still have time." "Time is exactly what Victor doesn't want you to have." Chidi closed his eyes. A question had been circling his mind for weeks now. Not about business, not about money. Something simpler, more dangerous. Who would still stand beside me if all of this disappeared? He didn't have an answer, and that silence was the loudest thing in the room. The sun did not rise gently that morning. It cracked the sky open like an egg, spilling thick orange heat across the rooftops of the Makoko waterfront. The air carried the smell of drying fish, sewage, and something faintly sweet. Jasmine, perhaps, if anyone cared enough to notice. Neka noticed. She always noticed smells. They were her map, her clock, her compass. She sat on a low wooden stool behind her bucket of flowers. Her dress, once white, had been washed so many times it had become the color of old milk. Her sandals were held together with wire. Her fingernails were short, scrubbed clean despite the dust. And her eyes were beautiful. Wide, dark, and perfectly still. They looked at everything and saw nothing. Every morning was the same. She would wake before the city did, guided by the sound of the first prayer call drifting across the lagoon. She would reach beneath her mat for the small plastic bag where she kept yesterday's coins. She would count them by touch. Then she would fill her bucket with whatever flowers Mama Bisi had left for her by the door. Roses on Mondays, lilies on Wednesdays, whatever survived on the other days. Neka arranged them by scent. She could tell a fresh flower from a dying one by the weight of its petals between her fingers. She charged very little. Sometimes she charged nothing at all, especially when children came. Children always smelled like dust and honesty. She had been blind since birth. There was a time, years ago, when her mother had saved enough for a consultation, but the doctor's answer had been simple and final. Nothing can be done. 3 words. Her mother had cried. Neka had not. She was 7. She learned early that crying required an audience, and she didn't have one. Now she had her flowers, her stool, and the small room she rented behind a mechanic's shop. That was enough. It had to be. The evening was settling in when she heard something unusual. Footsteps. Not the familiar shuffle of neighbors or the light skip of children. These were heavy, uneven, dragging. And between them, a sound she recognized instantly. Breathing. Labored. Desperate. Wet. Someone was hurt. It happened without warning. One moment, the narrow alley behind Neka's room was empty, and the next, something heavy collapsed against her door. She froze. Her fingers tightened around the flower stem in her hand. The breathing was closer now. Rough, broken, as if each inhale had to fight its way through something liquid. Then a voice, barely a whisper. "Please." One word. Raw. Desperate. Neka didn't move. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her body remained still. Years of blindness had taught her one thing above all: never react before you understand. She listened. No second voice, no footsteps following. Whoever this was, they were alone. Slowly, she stood. Her cane tapped twice against the ground, her way of measuring distance. 3 steps forward. Her hand found the doorframe. Then lower. Fabric. Warm. Wet. Blood. She knew the smell instantly. Iron and salt. Her fingers moved carefully. A shoulder. An arm. A chest rising and falling in shallow, rapid bursts. Male. Large. His clothes were smooth, expensive, the kind of fabric she rarely touched. "Can you stand?" she asked. No answer, just breathing. She crouched lower, her voice calm but firm. "I need you to help me. I can't carry you alone." A groan. Then movement. She felt his weight shift, his hand gripping her arm with surprising desperation. Together, slowly, painfully, she guided him inside. The room was small. She knew every inch of it by memory. 4 steps to the bed, 6 to the corner, 2 to the water bucket. She lowered him onto her mat. He groaned again, deeper this time. She reached for the water, tore a strip from her spare wrapper, pressed it against the wound she had found on his side. He hissed in pain. "Stay still," she said. "Who?" he started. "No questions," she said firmly. "Not now." Silence. Fragile, uncertain. She worked steadily, cleaning, pressing. Her hands moved with the precision of someone who had spent her entire life navigating the world through touch alone. She didn't need to see the wound. She could feel it, deep but not as wide as she feared. The bleeding was slowing. After several minutes, his breathing steadied. Still rough, but no longer drowning. "Thank you," he whispered. She didn't respond. She simply placed the water beside his head, stood, and returned to her stool by the door. Her fingers found a flower, a wilting rose, and she turned it slowly between her fingertips. She didn't ask his name. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't ask why a man wearing fabric worth more than her entire room had crawled bleeding into her doorway. Because whatever his story was, tonight he was just a man who needed help. And Neka had never turned anyone away from her door. The morning arrived with the smell of rain on hot concrete. The first drops tapped softly against the zinc roof, then harder, steadier, until the world outside became a curtain of sound. Chidi woke to darkness. Not the darkness of night, something different, unfamiliar. Then pain surged through his side and everything came rushing back. The ambush, the gunfire, running, falling, a door, a voice. Stay still. He turned his head slowly. The room was tiny. The ceiling was low. The walls were bare except for a single nail holding a faded calendar. And sitting by the door, perfectly still, was the girl. She was arranging flowers. Her fingers moved with a rhythm that seemed almost musical, lifting, turning, placing, each movement precise, unhurried. "You're awake," she said, without turning her head. Chidi blinked. "How did you—" "Your breathing changed." Silence. Brief, but loaded. "I need to leave," he said, attempting to sit up. Pain exploded through his torso. He fell back immediately. "You need to stay," she corrected calmly. "You don't understand. People are looking for me." "Then they'll find a blind girl selling flowers." She paused. "Not very threatening." Something almost like a laugh escaped him. Then he winced. "What's your name?" "Neka." "Chidi." She nodded once, her fingers never pausing on the flowers. "Your wound needs cleaning again, Chidi." He watched her stand, move to the bucket, wet a cloth, all without hesitation, without fumbling, and return to his side with the precision of someone navigating a room she knew better than her own heartbeat. Her fingers found the bandage. Steady, careful. "You've done this before," he said. "I take care of what comes to my door, including strangers." "Especially strangers." She pressed the cloth gently. "They're the ones who need it most." Silence. Warm, unexpected. The rain had stopped. Sunlight filtered through the tin walls in thin golden lines, casting patterns across the floor that Neka would never see, but Chidi couldn't stop staring at. He was sitting up now, his back against the wall. The pain had dulled to a deep, persistent ache, but he could breathe. He could think. And the more he thought, the more he noticed. She moved through her world with absolute certainty. She cooked on a small kerosene stove, measuring ingredients by touch and smell. She swept the floor in straight, even strokes. She arranged her flowers in the bucket outside, grouping them by something he couldn't identify until he realized: scent. She organized everything by scent. "You're watching me," she said. "How do you—" "I can feel it." She tilted her head slightly. "Your silence has weight when you're paying attention." He let out a slow breath. "You're remarkable." "I'm practical," she corrected. "There's a difference." That evening, a child came to buy a flower. A single rose. The boy placed coins in her palm. Neka counted them by touch, then handed 2 back. "That's too much," she said. "My mama said to give you extra. Tell your mama I charge for flowers, not for charity." The boy took the coins and ran. Chidi watched from the doorway, something tightening in his chest. "You gave money back," he said. "It wasn't mine." "Most people would have kept it." She turned her face toward him. Though she couldn't see him, her gaze landed perfectly on his. "I'm not most people." Silence. Deep. True. The evening air carried the scent of jasmine and frying plantain from a nearby stall. Chidi sat outside for the first time, on the small wooden stool beside Neka's flower bucket. His wound was healing. His strength was returning. He could leave. He knew that. He didn't. "Tell me something," he said. "Something." She smiled faintly. "Something real." She paused. Her fingers stilled on the flower she was holding. A long moment passed. I was 7 when the doctor told my mother nothing could be done. Her voice was quiet, not sad, just honest. She cried for 3 days. I didn't cry at all. Why not? Because crying required someone to cry too, and I was alone. The words landed somewhere deep inside Chidi's chest, a place he hadn't visited in years. You're not alone now, he said quietly. Her fingers resumed their work. Don't make promises you can't keep. I don't. Another silence, this one different, softer, almost like a held breath that neither of them wanted to release. That night, Chidi lay awake, staring at the dark ceiling. His phone, the one Emeka had smuggled to him that morning, buzzed with 17 missed calls. Board members, lawyers, his mother. The world outside was tearing itself apart looking for him. But inside this room, a blind girl who couldn't see his imported watch or his Italian shoes had treated his wound, shared her food, and returned a child's extra coins. And for the first time in his life, Chidi Okafor didn't want to be found. The morning was gray. Heavy clouds hung low over the rooftops, pressing the air down like a warning. Nneka felt the change in pressure against her skin before the first raindrop fell. Inside, Chidi was standing for the first time without support. His wound had closed. His color had returned. But something else had shifted. Something internal. Something he wasn't ready to name. Then the sound came. Vehicles, multiple, too many for this neighborhood. Too fast. Chidi's body went rigid. His hand instinctively moved to his side. What is it? Nneka asked. Stay inside. Doors slammed, voices shouted. Then Emeka's voice cut through the noise, sharp and urgent. Sir, we found you. We need to move, now! The room filled with bodies. Security men in dark clothing, radios crackling. Emeka stepped inside, scanning the space, then froze when he saw Nneka. Sir, he said, who is... She saved my life, Chidi said. Silence. Brief. Charged. One of the guards stepped closer, speaking into a radio. Target secured. Extraction in 2 minutes. Target. Chidi flinched at the word. Nneka stood near the wall, her hands clasped together. She couldn't see the men, but she felt them. The heaviness of their boots, the sharpness of their urgency, the coldness of a world she had never been part of. You're leaving, she said. Not a question. Chidi turned toward her. Nneka. It's fine. Her voice was steady. Too steady. This isn't... You're someone important. She cut him off quietly. I knew that from the fabric of your shirt. I knew it from the way you speak. I knew it from the day your phone started buzzing. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. I didn't lie to you, Chidi said. You didn't tell me the truth either. The words hit precisely where they were meant to. Sir, we need to go, Emeka urged. Chidi didn't move. His eyes stayed on Nneka, on the woman who had cleaned his wound with torn cloth, who had shared her food without asking, who had never once asked him for anything. I'll come back, he said. She turned slightly away. People always say that. I'm not people. A faint, sad smile crossed her lips. That's what they all say, too. Emeka placed a hand on Chidi's arm. The world was pulling him away. He let it. The door closed. The engines roared. And then silence returned. The kind of silence that filled rooms after something important had been taken away. Neka stood still for a long time. Then, slowly, she walked to the spot where he had lain. She knelt and pressed her hand against the mat. Still warm. She didn't cry. She never did. But her hand stayed there, fingers spread, holding on to the warmth for as long as it lasted. The city raged. Chidi was rushed into a private hospital, then a secure location. Files were opened. Arrests were initiated. Victor's network was being dismantled, piece by piece. But Chidi wasn't present.
Not really. His body sat in meetings. His voice answered questions. His hands signed documents. But his mind was 3 neighborhoods away, in a room with no electricity, no running water, and a bucket of flowers arranged by scent. 1 week passed, then 2. Emeka noticed. "You're different." Chidi didn't respond. "Since when do you stare out of windows?" Silence. "It's the girl, isn't it?" Chidi's jaw tightened. "Her name is Neka." Emeka studied him. "She's blind, she's poor, she's the only person who treated me like a human being when I had nothing." The word stopped Emeka cold. 3 streets away, Neka continued her routine. Flowers in the morning, customers at noon, silence at night. But something had changed. The room felt larger, emptier. His absence had shape, had weight. She found herself reaching toward the doorway more often, her fingers stretching toward a presence that was no longer there. "Stop it," she told herself. "He was never yours." But her mother's voice drifted back, faint as jasmine on night air. "The heart doesn't listen to instructions, my girl. It listens to truth." Neka closed her eyes, an old habit that meant nothing and everything. Then she heard footsteps. Not his. Heavier, rougher. 2 men stood at her doorway. She recognized the scent of cigarettes and leather. "Where is Chidi Okafor?" one of them demanded. Her blood went cold, but her voice stayed calm. "I don't know that name." "Don't lie to us." "I'm a blind flower seller." She gestured toward the bucket. "Do I look like someone who hides billionaires?" Silence, tense, dangerous. Then they left. Their footsteps faded into the alley, but Neka's hands didn't stop trembling for a very long time. That night, she sat on her stool, a dying rose between her fingers. The petals were soft, fragile, already falling. "He's gone. That's the truth. Accept it." But truth, she realized, wasn't always the same as peace. The evening was still. The air smelled of earth after rain, clean, almost sacred. The kind of quiet that came after storms had exhausted themselves. Neka heard the footsteps before they reached her door. She froze. These footsteps she knew, measured, careful, slightly favoring the left side. Her heart slammed once, hard. The footsteps stopped at her doorway. Silence. Long, loaded, terrifying. Then, "Hi." One word. His voice, softer than she remembered. Her fingers tightened on the flower stem. "Hi." Neither of them moved. The distance between the door and her stool was 3 steps. Tonight it felt like an ocean. "You said you'd come back," she said quietly. "I did. People say a lot of things." "I know." He paused. "But I'm here." Silence. This one different, less cold, more uncertain. "They came for you," she said. "Victor's men. They were here."
Chidi's entire body stiffened.
What? 2 men asking questions.
Did they hurt you?
No.
Are you sure?
Yes.
But his breathing had changed, sharper, protective. She heard him step inside, closer now, close enough to feel his warmth.
I should have been here,
he said, his voice cracked, barely, but enough.
You had your world to fix. You are my world to fix.
The words hung between them, unplanned, unfiltered, true. Neka's breath caught. Her fingers released the flower. It fell silently to the ground.
I don't want your money, she whispered. I don't want your empire. I don't want your name. What do you want?
A long pause. Then,
I want someone who stays.
Chidi lowered himself slowly, carefully, until he was kneeling beside her stool, his face level with hers. He took her hand. She felt his palm, rougher now than the first night, calloused, changed.
No more disappearing, he said. Promise? Promise.
Silence. But this time it was warm, full, safe. Weeks turned to months. The city moved on. Victor was arrested. The empire stabilized. Headlines faded. But something new was being built. Quieter, smaller, more real. Chidi rented a proper space in the heart of the city. Clean walls, wide windows. A wooden sign above the door. Neka's garden, fresh flowers and arrangements. Neka ran it herself. She hired 2 girls from the neighborhood, trained them to arrange by scent and texture the way she did. Customers came first out of curiosity. Then they came back because the flowers were genuinely, impossibly beautiful. You're famous, Chidi teased one afternoon.
Famous is your word, she smiled. I'm just busy.
He visited every evening. Sometimes he brought dinner. Sometimes he brought nothing but his presence. They talked about small things. The weather, a customer's strange request, the jasmine that had bloomed early this year.
You're different, she said one evening.
Different how?
Lighter.
She tilted her head.
Like something heavy finally fell off your shoulders. He looked at her. She couldn't see his expression, but she felt it. That particular quality of silence that came when someone was looking at you with everything they had.
It did, he said quietly. The morning was warm and golden. Sunlight poured through clean glass windows, falling softly across white linen and fresh jasmine. The air smelled exactly the way Neka had always imagined a perfect day would smell. Earth, flowers, and something unnamed that made her chest feel full. She stood in front of a mirror she couldn't see, but her fingers moved across the fabric of her dress, simple, flowing, soft as petals. The stylist had stepped back. The room was quiet. For a moment, Neka was somewhere else, standing behind a rusted bucket on a cracked sidewalk, counting coins by touch, listening for footsteps that never came. Then she was here, in a room that smelled of lilies, wearing a dress that belonged to her.
You look beautiful,
the stylist whispered. Neka smiled faintly. I'll take your word for it. Outside, the garden was simple. White flowers lined a short pathway. Chairs held only the people who mattered. No excess, no performance, just truth. Chidi stood at the front. He had stopped adjusting his cufflinks 5 minutes ago. He wasn't nervous. He was certain. More certain than he had ever been about anything in his life. Then she appeared.
guided gently by Mama Bisi, her steps slow, deliberate, grounded. Her cane tapped softly against the stone path. Each tap echoed like a heartbeat. "She's here," Emeka murmured beside him. Chidi didn't respond. He couldn't. Because everything, every border meeting, every billion earned, every empire built, felt small compared to the woman walking toward him. She reached him. The cane stopped. Silence. The kind that holds everything. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi," he replied. The officiant spoke simple words about union, courage, and choice. Then it was time. "Do you take this woman?" "I do." No pause, no hesitation. "Do you take this man?" Neka's lips curved. "I do." They exchanged rings. When Chidi slid the band onto her finger, she ran her thumb across it slowly, feeling its weight, its warmth, its permanence. Then their vows. Short, quiet, meant. Chidi spoke first. "You found me bleeding on your doorstep with nothing but expensive clothes and a dying heartbeat." Neka's breath caught slightly. "You cleaned my wound, shared your food, and never once asked me who I was." His voice trembled. "You loved me before you knew my name."
And I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of that. Silence. Deep. Full. Then Neka spoke. Her voice was steady, clear.
"I have never seen your face," she said. "I don't know the color of your eyes. I don't know if you're handsome or plain."
A quiet breath moved through the gathering.
"But I know the sound of your breathing when you're afraid. I know the weight of your silence when you're thinking. I know how your hand feels when it holds mine." Her voice softened. "And that is more than enough."
The guests didn't applaud immediately. They couldn't, because some truths are too heavy to follow with noise. Then, slowly, warmth filled the garden. Smiles, tears, a gentle eruption of joy. As the celebration carried on softly around them, Neka stood beside Chidi, her hand in his, the scent of jasmine drifting on the evening air.
"Can I tell you something?" she said. "Always. Sometimes the person who sees most clearly is the one without eyes." She smiled. "Because we don't get distracted by what people look like. We only feel what they are."
Chidi squeezed her hand. And in the end, the blind girl who sold flowers on a cracked sidewalk didn't just find love. She found the one person brave enough to be seen, truly seen, by someone who couldn't see at all. Not because of wealth, not because of sacrifice, but because kindness, once given freely, has a way of returning in forms you never imagined. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to this channel and tell us where you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.